What books really made an impression on you this year?
There are three that I'm going to comment on, David. The first is my former boss, Barack Obama's memoir. Politicians' memoirs are usually ghost-written exercises in self-justification and in rewarding the politician's friends with compliments. President Obama's book is obviously self-written. It is much more candid than most such memoirs. Like all of us, President Obama sees himself in a basically favorable light, but with much more admission of uncertainty, of possible regret, and much more candor in his portraits of events and ideas. And so if one's looking for a government memoir or a political memoir that gives a feeling of what it's like to be there, seeing things as a senior actor does, I can't think of one that's better than President Obama's. Whatever you think of his skill as a president, his skill as a memoirist is quite extraordinary.
And one of the things that struck me about that book, Larry, was that it doesn't feel like it's pulling a lot of punches, but it also doesn't feel like it's a lot of score settling. And there are people clearly he has really differences of opinion with, people actually he really doesn't quite admire, and yet it doesn't feel like he's settling scores.
I think that President Obama's strength, and some would say his limitation, is a kind of extraordinarily mature perspective and capacity for strategic empathy. He has the ability to walk in the shoes of others and therefore to understand where they're coming from. And that limits his capacity for rage or for a desire for revenge. And for many of us, that is a great strength. For others, it bespeaks an excessive neutrality when merits are clear. But I think that is something that comes through in a book that is certainly quite revealing of the character of its author.
So that's one, President Obama's book, Deaths of Despair.
Deaths of Despair is written by the Princeton professors Ann Case and Angus Deaton, and particularly for those like me who are drawn to statistics and quantitative information, it is a profoundly disturbing evocation of what is happening to the middle of our country. What's happening to the middle of our country geographically, what's happening to the middle of our country in the sense of the middle of the income distribution, what's happening to people who have middle-rung jobs in hierarchies. And what's happening is that too many of them are dying too young. We've taken it as a hallmark of a progressive society that life expectancy goes up. And for substantial subgroups in our population, that has stopped being true. And that is disturbing in its own sake. And it is also disturbing because of all of the things in terms of life fulfillment that are likely to be coinciding with that. And so in terms of pointing to what is going to be a huge challenge for our democracy going forward, this book does a superb job of complementing more individualistic treatments like hillbilly elegy of life. And you can agree or disagree with some of their policy recommendations, but there's a starkness in decreasing life expectancy and increasing death that I think has to command the attention of anyone who cares about our country's future.
And your third selection goes overseas to China.
Kishore Mahbubani, a longtime Singaporean diplomat and international thinker, has been perhaps the most powerful voice over the last decade, making the case that the big transformation in the world is the shift in the center of gravity of just about everything from the West to the East. And he makes this case in many ways and in different forums, notably in this book, Has China Won? But I have to say that when I looked at non-democratic China running its society in a way where, despite early mistakes, the death rate from COVID as a share of the population was in the range of being just 1 or 2% of what ours has been. It does have to make you think about the capacity of different systems to protect their people. And I think that people have to look very carefully at the differences between Asia and the West in terms of the success with which societies have dealt with COVID, and think very carefully about that. I'm not prepared to say what it means or what policy inferences follow from it, but it is a very stark kind of observation, and one that I think will deserve over time a lot of reflection.
It's a very powerful point, although it also breaks down in some messy ways as well. John Micklethwaite, our friend, our mutual friend, wrote a book as well this year, and he noted that, in fact, it did not break down necessarily by authoritarian versus democratic. I mean, even in Asia, you have Taiwan, you have South Korea, you have New Zealand, for goodness sakes.
It doesn't break down on authoritarian democracy grounds, and as the examples of New Zealand and Australia suggest, it doesn't break down on racial or ethnic grounds. And I don't think it's something that we fully understand, but it's something that I think is very important. And I think it will lead to more of the kind of thinking that Kishore Mahbubani engages in this book. And as I say, I'm not prepared to reach any conclusion, but I think often in life, what's really important is to ask the right questions. And I think in a way, all three of these books, Kishore on China's success, Case and Deaton on the patterns of mortality, Obama on reflecting on our political system from the perspective of someone leading it, pose profoundly important questions. And that's the first step towards making progress.